Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the people of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. Well, speaking of pride and power, we have a great guest for you today. We are joined by Maria Wirries. Maria is a BFA graduate of the musical theater program here at Penn State, as well as a powerhouse vocalist and songwriter. She was most recently seen in the Off-Broadway revival of Kinky Boots and the Broadway and touring productions of Dear Evan Hansen. At the same time, Maria served as the resident commission writer at Penn State alongside fellow alum Christian Thompson, composing a new musical for the 2023 graduating class entitled Engaged, which had its premiere at Feinstein's and 54 Below. Another new musical of theirs is Iobart, was accepted into the John Mercer Writers Grove at the Godspeed Musicals. And she is currently in the BMI Writers Workshop and has been debuting her own new works around New York City. You can check out her music on Spotify and Instagram at Maria_Wirries. That's Maria_WIRRIES. Maria, welcome to the people of Penn State.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here this morning.
Well, it's exciting to be with you and talk about your fabulous career. But let's start right at the beginning. How'd you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
So I had a strange trajectory through school. I left high school after 10th grade because I knew I wanted to pursue musical theater. And my dream was to move to New York and start living the dream. But I had a lot of really amazing people in my life at that time talk about how important it was to pursue higher education. And I was excited about school. And there was an alumni, Arne Hoffman, who has unfortunately passed, but he was from the class of 1957. And he was in my town, Sarasota, Florida, a big donor of the arts and advocate for Penn State. And he had spoken to me about auditioning at Penn State because they have this incredible musical theater program. And as a first generation college student, I didn't really know anything about it. And so I was 16 years old and I auditioned for a couple programs, but Penn State was the only one that I actually went to the on-campus audition for. And they accepted me, and it completely blew my mind and changed my world that, you know, I had these people advocating on my behalf and speaking for me, and it immediately became my family.
So we know the musical theater program is a demanding one here at Penn State. A lot of time involved with not only the studies, but also the productions. What else were you involved in as a student while you were here?
Wow. Well, you're absolutely right that it is basically a conservatory program inside of a university, but I absolutely tried to soak up everything I could. I was a big fan of science all throughout school. So I spent time in the plant pathology school. I spent time in the entomology school, taking classes here and there when I could. I actually did a sort of research study in plant pathology as well, which was really fascinating. Being at Penn State sparked my activism as well. We coordinated a lot of shows while I was there, speaking about different equalities in our school. And it was a special experience, I think, because there's so much going on and it's almost overwhelming. And part of me wishes that I could be there forever because you could just really soak up absolutely anything.
So when some people come to the musical theater program, right, obviously the goal or part of the goal is to get to Broadway, right? Others have the aspirations of television or movies. What was your initial career goal? Was it to get to Broadway, or was it to go beyond into other formats?
Well, I was always a singer growing up. I knew that music and singing was kind of what I wanted to do in some regard. And going to school for musical theater was not as I said, like my original path. I knew that I wanted to go to school or study music in some way, but specifically the niche genre of musical theater allowed me to take acting classes, dancing classes, and singing classes and learn music theory and sort of take it all in one truncated major. And of course, once I started to become more and more involved in musical theater, the idea of Broadway was very exciting for me. And moving to New York City, someone from the swamps in Florida, it felt like the most amazing place in the world, and absolutely is, and where I've ended up. But yeah, absolutely, Broadway was a dream, and just getting to work professionally in theater and say that that's what I do full time is the dream.
This is the people of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Maria Wirries, actor, composer, lyricist. The list goes on, activist, right? The list can go on and on. So take us, you graduate from Penn State.
Yes.
Take us through your career journey into musical theater. How did you go from Happy Valley to Broadway?
Sure. So I'll shout out Penn State Musical Theater again. We are so fortunate to have such a wealth of knowledge and such a network inside of New York City. I mean, one of the biggest challenges when you're first auditioning and getting into the city is just having a place to stay. New York can be kind of inaccessible if you don't have a network of people, and our alumni network is so vast. And the musical theater program has been going on for years and years and years, and our professors are experts at matching us with people who they think we'll vibe with. And so I stayed on plenty of couches and subletted from people when I was first coming into the city for auditions for agents and different shows. While I was still a senior at Penn State, I was auditioning for this show called Dear Evan Hansen. And I was taking the mega bus from State College to New York City in the middle of the night, doing these early morning auditions and coming back in time to finish up my classwork and do rehearsals for our shows back at Penn State. And it was this very long and arduous process. We had 7 callbacks throughout the last semester of my senior year. And then right after our showcase, which is when we all go to New York to perform in front of agents and casting directors, I got a phone call that said, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "Nothing." And they said, "Well, we would love for you to join the Broadway and touring companies of Dear Evan Hansen, starting on Broadway and then transitioning out onto the road with the first national tour." And it completely changed my life. I didn't know exactly how I was going to be moving to New York. I did know that I had this wonderful well of people that I could reach out to, but it completely changed the trajectory. And then I was moving to New York in about a week. I packed up all of my things, got rid of anything else, and had a suitcase and a carry-on ready for tour. And that's what I lived out of in the city. And for about 4 months before I went out on the road.
So talk a little bit about that experience, right? You go to New York, you're there, like you said, for 4 months. Compare and contrast the day-to-day of performing on Broadway versus performing in a touring company.
Sure. So in the Broadway company, the one benefit, there's obviously wonderful things about it, but one of the biggest benefits is that you have a home base in the city. At that point, I was subletting, so it wasn't exactly my own home base, but I was going back to the same place every single night. I was an understudy in both companies, so we did have rehearsals during the day, and then we would have the shows at night if we ever had to go on, or if we were just there watching, making sure that we kept our skills on point for the show. But I think the biggest difference about a Broadway show to the tour is your external life. In New York, you have your friends and your chosen family and your home and your things all in one place. And on the road, your family and your friends and everybody are kind of the same truncated group of people. And your home changes every period of time. And so you have to learn all of these ways to make yourself comfortable in places that are going to change all the time, and really get to know a group of people who you're going to be spending extended periods of time with. And in my case, over 2 years.
So could you talk a little bit about some of the other challenges that you faced cracking into the business? I mean, certainly finding a place to live and feel safe and feel comfortable is one thing, but there are professional challenges that I'm sure that you have faced. What are some of those challenges and how did you overcome them?
Sure. Well, I mean, it starts even further back because I've been performing semi-professionally since I was a young child and doing concerts and performances literally anywhere I could get in.
Right.
And I think that the biggest challenges were you're always in a way kind of proving yourself, as you move up through the ranks or, putting in your hours, if you will. And I think as someone who's like young and ambitious and hungry and excited, you get impatient. And I think it's only with time that you realize that the right thing comes to you at the right time. But when you are young, you're like, I want everything and I'm fighting for everything. And everything feels so much more personal, especially in auditions. Learning to accept a no, I think, is the hardest challenge in our field because we hear it constantly. And it's hard not to take it personally especially when you care really deeply about a project. So some of my early, big auditions that I wanted so bad didn't go my way. And I really had to understand that it is not about you. It's about just going in the room, giving it your best, and the right things just do keep coming. But it's a little bit about time, just aging and finding comfort and groundedness in yourself and your life. But also keeping yourself afloat in between contracts. I think that's a big thing that people in our field don't always talk about because it's maybe not as glamorous, but in between finding jobs or, things that are adjacent to music, like writing, or I was writing just songs for a company for a period of time and selling the songs to them, which is still, working in the world, but it's less, it's not specifically doing musical theater or booking that big show. Right now I've been working at this amazing wine shop and I've been learning a lot about wine. It's just these things that you do in the in-betweens that keep you afloat, and trying to find those positions can be challenging. So especially things that are, flexible enough for you to say, I need to leave town for 2 weeks and do a reading or go somewhere. So.
Yeah, it sounds like, it's all about the mindset you take into to the various kind of transition periods and to the kind of stations that you stop at throughout your career. I want to talk a little bit about mindset. I would imagine that your first performance of a show is memorable. It's something that you'll never forget, right? And then your first week is probably wonderful, and then you're in your first month. How do you maintain that same level of enthusiasm over a 4-month period or over a touring schedule?
Yeah. So one of the things I loved about Penn State was the head of our program, John Simpkins, is a big footballer. And we sort of like, we're all big fans of football if you went to Penn State. And he trained us a lot like we were a sports team. We're athletes, and our bodies and our minds need to constantly be in some sort of training to withstand the endurance that it takes to do these types of schedules and amounts of shows and for long periods of time. So I would say it's really about like an intense focus and reminder of what is important about it. So we're a team when we're in a show. Every single person, from the person calling lights, stage management, people building the set, the directors, the other actors, we are a team. And if you are lagging behind in some way or thinking that, it's not that important anymore, or, I've done 100 of these, there's a lot that's at stake. It's safety. It's just overall, morale of the show. And also we always say this thing over and over again, that we were once that person who was in the audience, who we spent the last dollar we had to go see this Broadway show because it was what we loved and what we cared about. And we wanted to see this person do their thing, and the magic that was for us and what encouraged us to push forward and try to become those people. You always want to think about those people out there and how you could be changing their lives. And maybe this story means more to them than you could ever know. And keeping that sort of a thought in your mind, and that you are a part of a team, and that you're an artist and you want to express. It's about keeping it fresh every night. What are the new things you can find in a role? And then at a certain point, even, I was talking to a bunch of alumni recently who are working on Broadway. At a certain point, it also becomes your job that you clock in and clock out of, and knowing that your job is important and that it's something you should care about, no different than if you were in consulting or something else. It may become less dynamic and exciting, but you always have those moments where it reminds you, you're standing on stage and you take it in again and you're like, wow, I can't believe that this is my job.
So you mentioned earlier that your initial passion was music. How do you, well, again, this is another mindset question, right? What's the mindset around feeding multiple passions, right? I mean, you're a performer, right? You're clocking into that job that you've just talked about, and then you're singing the same 8 to 12 songs every night, right? How did you keep kind of the creative artist on the musical side? How did you kind of feed that hunger?
Sure. Well, exactly. You are so right about you're singing the same things over and over again, and that can become a little monotonous. And as creatives, as artists, you get the itch to do something else, and I think for me that manifested initially in just songwriting. I always liked to write songs, but I hadn't really taken it very seriously because mainly I didn't have a music degree in the way of, I didn't study music theory at a music conservatory. I took a bit in school, but I think I invalidated myself a lot with that side. It was kind of my secret little passion project on the side. And it did feed me a lot just to be creating. And there were other people on the tour along with me who were also writers, but they were musical theater writers. And I was so excited about the idea of like, oh, you're taking this craft into your own hands. As an actor, sometimes you can feel a bit like a blank canvas that other people are working on. And while that's like an honor and a privilege in a lot of ways, especially when you're in a room and a space with people who really value and take care of you, there are also, of course, times where you don't feel that way and you feel kind of like a pawn moving around a chessboard with people who don't always take as good care. And I just started to feel myself being pulled to, along with my activism and wanting to create space for people like me that felt authentic and exciting and new. And all of this sort of kept bubbling up into this, you need to be writing, you need to be making pieces. And as a writer, you get to choose your teams and you get to build the world that you want to see in a way that as an actor, you are just a piece in the puzzle in a lot of ways. So I got excited about building the table and building the pieces of the puzzle and all of those things. It ignited a fire in me that I didn't know could be there, even though I had a roaring fire for musical theater and for performance. There was this whole other thing going on as well. And so I found that it was creating, it was making the pieces, it was writing that started to fill those gaps.
So as a performer and as somebody who's a musician and writes music, who have been your biggest influences?
Oh gosh. Well, I think initially as a performer, I grew up, my mom was born in 1935. And so her style and genres of music differed a lot from what was on the regular radio at the time growing up. And so we listened to the oldies station kind of exclusively. And I also grew up in Florida. And so country music was something that really influenced me as a young person. I found the storytelling of people like Dolly Parton, Patsy Cline, Hank Williams, these like really traditional American storytellers to be so rich and fascinating. And so that was kind of my first window in was country. Garth Brooks is one of my, I could not be a bigger fan. If I ever got to work with him, I think I'd actually die, because I think that he's a storyteller. And I think getting to see him actually at Penn State, he came through, I think my sophomore or junior year, I bought a ticket. I sat in the Bryce Jordan Center and watched somebody just kind of like literally just step on stage, and the audience was screaming for minutes on end and crying. I was one of them. And there was this amazing thing for me about a performer like that, where they have such a responsibility of holding so many people at once, holding space for so many people at once. To me, that was just pure magic. Like that is what magic is in this world to me. And so performers like that, I think as I got older, people like Joni Mitchell have been a big influence on me. Just drawn to storytelling and specifically older sounds that I think I sort of weave through even as I'm creating music that may come from today. There's always those influences in the back of my head that, keep pulling me back to what's the story, what's the emotion. I think that those are some of the people I would say are my biggest influences.
So take me through the process of writing a song, right?
Yeah.
Do you write a song with specific artists in mind, or do you write a song based on the story that you want to tell and then have it match up with a performer?
So that's a great question. I think my catharsis version of songwriting is I'm working through something and I just sit down and like just play a song and it just kind of falls out. I think because it's so present to me. My version of songwriting is kind of like it all comes out and then I can go back and see what I want to play with and change, but it does all tend to just start flowing when it begins, which is nice. I'm grateful for that. But there are times, like when I was doing the Penn State commission, where I was not writing for myself. And that was a newer thing for me. Once I started writing musicals, I had to take into consideration many different things, different types of voice styles, age, what the character needs. And so I think in that type of a process, I become very inspired by who it's going to be sung by. We were so fortunate with this group of 14 incredible artists who could not have been more different and wonderful. I'm jumping into this topic, but we had the opportunity to Zoom with them for about 3 hours, just intaking information from them. And they were a well of just excitement and raw energy and like perspectives all over the place. And it was so inspiring to sit down and go, okay, who is this human? What do I want to write for them? What do I want to create for them? And I think that I initially was more interested in writing songs for myself, but that unlocked this whole thing of excitement for writing for others. So yeah, the process is bizarre and messy and throwing things at the wall. And I was collaborating with Christian Thompson, who's an alum as well. We were at school at the same time, and we get together in a diner and a specific diner in Manhattan and drink milkshakes and talk about what we think it should be about or go over songs. And the process looks different for everybody, but I think in my experience, it was an inspiration based upon the person.
So let's look to the future, right?
Yeah.
You're currently in the BMI Writers Workshop. Tell me about that, because that sounds like it's feeding a real passion for you right now.
Absolutely. So I had heard about this through some other writers in New York who are incredible. I mean, the BMI Writers program has quite a legacy of alumni themselves. And I auditioned again with that like little voice behind me going, oh, well, maybe this, maybe you're not quite enough yet, or you haven't done enough yet, or whatever it was. What can you bring to the table as somebody who, like, I'm very slow at transcription. So if I'm actually notating music, it takes me some time. It's possible, but it takes me time. And so I think I sort of was being down and hard on myself in that way, but I got accepted and joined a group of 40 people. We're about to start, I think, in a week and a half again for our second year. Joined 40 people, composers, lyricists. I was tracked into the lyricist side, but ended up doing some assignments of both because I submitted as both. And they could not be more diverse in background and musical expression. And I think what's amazing about it is that it taught me that I bring my own thing to the table, and that thing doesn't have to be everyone else's thing, just as their thing doesn't have to be mine. And the people that I've met who are incredible transcribers and who are like, oh, absolutely, I'll help you with that, and I can lend my ear to things that they're curious about and my perspective to things, and it reminded me again that this is such a team sport, musical theater. It can feel so individual. You can get so caught up in, I'm an actor, I'm on the street, I'm standing outside of Pearl Studios for my audition, and everyone's against me and nobody gets me and all that type of stuff. But it is just so the people and the team you build around you and those you hold close. And BMI is just one more amazing extension of this network and web of people that I have access to. And so we're about to start year 2. I've secured my writing partner for the year, who's within the class. She's an incredible musician herself, and I'm very excited to see what's next for that program and that process.
What an amazing experience. I've always said the best way to make an idea better is to share it with someone else and get that different perspective and workshop on it, right? I mean, we're all better when we have other people helping us.
I agree.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Maria Wirries. She's an actor, a composer, a lyricist, a writer, just Penn Stater extraordinaire. At the end of each podcast, Maria, we like to have a little bit of fun. So I'm going to ask you just a couple of quick hitter questions, and you just say the first thing that pops to mind.
Oh boy. Okay.
All right. Your favorite class at Penn State?
Oh, absolutely my plant pathology course that I took. It was amazing. It was called Plant Stress. It isn't easy being green. Take that class.
That's amazing. How about your favorite role that you've ever played?
I mean, to relate it to Penn State, truthfully, I did a production of a show called Hair, and it was just such a beautiful and wonderful experience. The character's name was Ronnie. So I feel like that probably has to be my favorite so far.
If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why? And you're in New York City, so where would you take them?
Oh gosh. Oh man. I mean, I love this place called Tavern on the Green. It's in Central Park. I love Central Park, so that would probably be the spot. And I know I mentioned, actually, I would probably take Cher to dinner. I think Cher is so cool. She's such a awesome performer, someone I've also looked up to forever. I would love to ask her who her costume designer is.
You and Sean Hayes would like to know all of that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Your most unusual "We Are" moment, where maybe you saw a Penn Stater and yelled out "We Are" and they didn't expect it, or you got it where you didn't expect it.
Oh, man. I mean, it happens all the time. That's what's the amazing thing about it. I try to explain it to people who are outside of our network, and they don't get it until we're walking down the street and I see somebody and I'm just like, "We are," and they actually do it back. I think one of my favorite ones, I was doing the hike to the Hollywood sign.
Oh, wow.
And when we were in LA, and way across this canyon, they were wearing this huge Penn State sure I could see it across this way. So we gave it a try. We shouted, "We are," and it echoed across. And they said, "We are back." And we were all cheering and excited. And it was cool to do the chant across the canyon at the Hollywood sign.
That's amazing. That's amazing. There were a group of us who went to see Six. That Jasmine Forsberg is performing in. And when she was introduced at the end of the show, right, to take her bow, we yelled out, "We are" to her.
Oh, I'm sure she loved that. Oh,
it was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah. That's awesome.
How about your favorite Penn State sport?
Oh my gosh. I don't want to be just generic, but I did love the football games. I did not grow up with football, so that was a complete mind blow to me to walk into that stadium. I'll never forget the feeling of it the first time, and just sort of like being thrown in the air when when there was a goal. And that was, I think it's that hits the top for me.
Were you here when musical theater did a halftime performance?
I wasn't here. I was the year right before that, but I saw the video. I was supporting from afar.
How about your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Oh, alumni swirl, hands down. Alumni swirl. Oh gosh, I wish I had that right now.
That is great. Well, Maria, we want to thank you for joining us on the People of Penn State podcast. It's when alumni like you allow us to tell your story that brings pride to Penn Staters everywhere. And for that, we're truly grateful.
Oh, thank you for having me. Penn State, it was a dream, continues to be a dream. I love every part of it.
And I want to thank our producer, Vincent Longaro, our guest relations coordinator, Abby Clark, for all they do behind the scenes to bring these great stories to you. If you like this episode, I hope that you'll subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating, drop us a review. It helps us spread the word of this podcast and the great stories that we share to other Penn Staters. If you're a member of the Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks for tuning in and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are